Hi, my name is JC Beichner. I'm an award-winning author of the book Grace in Progress, Prayers for the Beautifully Broken. I'm a contributor at Human Defense Initiative, and this is my story. When I was 4 months out of high school, I ended up pregnant. And I was in no way mature enough or equipped or emotionally ready for the debate swirling around me about whether I had the baby or not. There wasn't a debate. I was so scared, and I was so worried about what other people were going to think about me that I didn't even give it an opportunity. I didn't even hit pause. I just tried to find the quickest way to get out of my problem. I didn't want to be the girl whose father died when she was 10 and is now knocked up and pregnant, and all the loss that my brother and I had experienced growing up and having a single parent, and just everything, all the ways that the world had broken me. I just thought, this is no place for a child. And I really was negotiating with God to get me out of it, which is just so ridiculous. And at the time I contacted my boyfriend, who I thought I was in love with, and I didn't ask him what should we do. I told him what I was going to do, and the only person who tried to talk to me or that even spoke to about it was a girl who told me to have an abortion. And so the day that I walked into that clinic, I didn't have a ride. My mother had no idea where I was. I didn't have a friend with me. And in some small way, as I walked in there, I knew it was my responsibility to protect my child. And I knew it was a baby, but I didn't want to face it. And I just thought, I'm too broken for this. The world's too broken for this, and I thought negotiating with God to get me out of it was going to work. But it didn't. And, I remember laying on that table and begging God to forgive me when it was done. And I didn't have anesthesia. It was the most incredibly destructive, incredibly painful day of my entire life, still to this day. And there isn't a day that goes by that I don't regret it or wish that it turned out differently. There's not a day that goes by that I don't think about that child, my baby. Wonder what it would be doing now if I hadn't made that choice. When I got to the clinic, nobody offered me an ultrasound. Nobody tried to talk to me or give me options or just get me to see another way. I was a teenager, and I just thought I knew what was best for me, and I totally didn't. And I ended up having it without anesthesia because I didn't have a ride home. Even when I told them that I didn't have a ride home, nobody said, look, maybe you should come back tomorrow with someone who could give you a ride. Nobody said that. And so I went in that room, and I was faced with a doctor that I'd never met before, who didn't know my name. There were nurses there that seemed more worried about getting through the next few moments than they did about me as a person. So it was a horrible day. It was the worst day of my life. And how do you heal from that? I mean, for years, I just buried it. I didn't tell anyone. I even told people I'm pro-choice. I threw myself into service. I started working in law enforcement, and just did everything I could to, make up for it in some way. But it was always there, and God kept calling me out on it. And the moment that it happened, I knew I was never going to be the same again. I knew that the person that God created me to be was no longer that same person, that I had done something that I couldn't take back. And as soon as it happened, I wanted it to unhappen, and I wanted to take it all back, and I begged God to forgive me. And I know now that in that moment, God forgave me because he loves me so unconditionally, but I couldn't forgive myself. And so I just kept trucking, and I just never had a day that I didn't think of my child and wish I had done something different. So I threw myself into my work, and years later, my husband and I, we got married, and I was still working in law enforcement as a civilian investigator, and we got married, we moved out of state, and we were sitting in a church here in Scottsdale, Arizona, and this music was playing, and my husband, he was Catholic, and I wasn't, and I was raised Lutheran, but I always went to church with whoever's house I spent the night at, so I knew God was everywhere. And as we sat there and the music started to play, I just felt the Holy Spirit. I just felt God calling me to heal it. How do you heal abortion? I mean, I even thought that they wouldn't want me in that church if they'd known what I had done. They knew what I had done. And but these songs would play, and I just would well up, and I didn't know why. I was so emotional, and the more and more I went to church, the more and more I knew that I couldn't carry the burden anymore, that I had to let God heal it. And I didn't know how to go about that. And my husband and I decided to become Catholic because of these moments. So I entered into the process to become a member of the church, and we were sitting in a discussion group, and someone said it's not whether or not they're going to throw stones at us because we're sinners, it's how big the stones are going to be. And in that moment, it even makes me emotional as I tell it, but in that moment, just God's grace just enveloped me, and I realized, I don't care, just throw the stones. I can't carry this on my own anymore. And I just surrendered it. And I just said, God, heal this. And the people I was sitting with, were blown away. And I thought, they won't let me become a Catholic if they know, that I'm a woman who killed her baby and had an abortion. But I was looking for grace, and this was now some 15 years later, and I just wanted to give it over to God. And in that moment, I did, and he called me out to tell my mom. My mom and I had never had a great relationship, and I thought, I don't know how to heal this. I mean, how do you heal from something like abortion? You can't do it alone. You have to have someone help you. You have to have a community. You have to have God at the center of your life, and you have to pray without ceasing. And my mom and I had never been very close, and I thought, I need to tell her. And so I went home to LA, and we're driving together somewhere, and it was the first time we had been alone, and I honestly heard God's voice in my heart, in my head, saying, you're going to tell her today. And on our way back from that trip, I told her. And when I told her, I was crying, and I was just, I was still very embarrassed by my, just very ashamed, And I told her, Mom, I had an abortion, and I never told you, and that's why I've never had kids, and because I always felt guilty about it, and I'm just so sorry I let it come between us. And and she said, well, I have to tell you something too. And she went on to tell me that in college she got pregnant, that she had an unplanned pregnancy, and that she gave the child up for adoption. And the interesting thing is that she went went on to say that she had tried to hide it. You know, she didn't tell anybody. She was 6 months pregnant, hiding her belly under dresses and coats, and by the summer of 1964, it was getting harder to hide, and she ended up getting in a car accident, and this truck hit her very small car, and it literally broke it in half, and she fractured her hip. And my grandparents, who she was living with, you know, brought a doctor to the house to examine her, and they, you know, of course he discovered she was pregnant, and they told her parents, and my grandmother, she was a redhead. My grandmother was Dutch, and she said, I don't care if the Americans, what they think, and you just have that baby. But my mom was scared, and her boyfriend at the time, he didn't want to have a baby in his life, and so they gave this baby girl up for adoption. And so in telling my mom about the worst transgression of my life, I found out I had a sister. And we later found her and had an amazing family reunion. But I never realized that opening myself up to God's grace, to letting Jesus into my heart, and to be in my struggle with me, to forgive myself, was going to produce so much abundance. You know, when I became pregnant, I didn't think that this was God's gift to me. I didn't think that, you know, I was just worried about all the things that were going to go wrong, how I didn't have money, how I didn't have my own car. I was working 2 jobs. My boyfriend was in the military, and he was shipping out, and, you know, we just weren't prepared. But I never thought for 1 minute that this baby was God bringing love into my life. And instead of, you know, accepting the love, I created more loss. You know, growing up, before I lost my dad, my parents had divorced. We had moved in with my grandparents. My grandmother died shortly after. Then my dad died. Then my grandfather died a year after my father. We just were devastated for many years, and just, you know, I thought that's what the world was about, loss. And it never occurred to me that that baby could have been all the love we needed. And so, you know, it moved me so greatly that I had to find my sister and reunite her with my mom, which was amazing. And yeah, and start the healing process. And I ended up starting to write, and I've written a novel about it. I've written a book of prayer about it. And I just think to heal from it, you have to heal from abortion, you have to reach out. You have to keep stepping out of the box, you know, because it puts you in a box. It's you struggle with depression. You struggle, I mean, God, every Mother's Day. I mean, there isn't a day that goes by that I don't wish I had done something differently, that I hadn't walked into that clinic and turned around and walked right back out. You know, and so all the holidays are a reminder, and as time passes, it gets easier. You can't do it alone. It's not about you, it's about God in you, and that just like that baby, you were created for something beautiful, and God's just never finished with you. You know, as long as you're willing to let Him lead you, who knows where He'll lead you. But He's not giving up on you, and you shouldn't give up on you, and you're enough, you know. And it's my opportunity now to advocate for those without a voice, for every child, for every baby, for every mother who thinks that they're not enough or that they don't have enough. And I feel so privileged that God blessed me to do that. I do it as joyfully as I can. God's grace in my life has transformed it. In that moment that horrible act occurred, God was with me, and I know that. And he may have been weeping, but as soon as I asked for his forgiveness, it was there. And it took me years to accept it, but it's always there. You just have to surrender it. So now I just try to speak life over everything I say and do, and reach out as much as I can, and speak to as many people as I can, and encourage people to, read my book and pray with me into all of these struggles that we face. I always say it's a holy struggle. The road is long, but it is not without purpose, and our pain is not without purpose. My pain will not be without purpose, and sometime I'll meet that someday, when the world is done for me, and I'll meet that child again, and I'll have my child. But today I'll just keep giving back, and hoping that speaking out and just speaking the truth can save one more life.